Hello and welcome to IMHO. Today I'm talking to Ash Nallawalla about visibility governance. Ash is a visibility governance consultant based in Melbourne, Australia, and is the author of the Managing SEO series of books. Ash has over 24 years of experience in enterprise SEO, having worked in-house for some of Australia's biggest brands, so he knows firsthand what happens when SEO has to survive inside large, complex organizations. More recently, he's been writing and speaking about how AI reshapes as brands get discovered, and visibility itself is becoming a governance problem, not just a marketing one. So diving straight in, Ash, you've written about SEO failures being organizational rather than technical. What's the worst example you've seen of a governance breakdown that impacted SEO work?
Most SEO failures are structural, which means the team didn't fail, but the system did. And the damage could be disproportionate to the cause. A governance gap of weeks could create months of recovery. And governance is not a constraint on speed. However, the absence of governance is. So I'm going to give you a composite picture drawn from a few workplaces. I won't name them, but I'll give a generic description. So if you know the indexing part of the Search Console, you often see bad numbers, all the negative things. And normally you see them in the tens or hundreds at the most. Here I was seeing millions and tens of millions. And I thought, there's something seriously wrong here because Australia's population is 25 million, and um, I was seeing 22 million pages that were crawled, currently not indexed. So I had to look deeper. And to cut a long story short, someone in the past had decided that creating a page for every combination of facet would be a good idea. So you can imagine a red car in this state, with this size engine, all the combinations that you normally associate with a car. They had created a page, or they'd allowed a page to be created through faceted navigation. From their viewpoint, you were just selecting all these things. Perhaps they didn't realize that Google was going to create a page for every combination it could crawl. There were 10 quintillion pages. And if you've not heard that number before, it is 1 followed by 18 zeros. And that is where we calculated that if Googlebot could read 1,000 URLs a second, it would take 310 billion years to crawl all of them. And naturally, Google was not going to do that. And it was an interesting site. If you check the Googlebot crawl, it was visiting 5 million times a day. And it makes you wonder how many bots it can spawn. And if it can send 5 million to one website, I'm really impressed by Googlebot's crawling ability. So that place didn't have governance because no one above the SEO level or the product manager level realized the problem. They just knew someone was doing SEO, and yes, we're getting lots of traffic. And in fact, this was the leading website. It would always rank high. I'd gone through years of managers not understanding SEO, so I wrote my first book, Accidental SEO Manager, in 2022. And I used that title accidental because in reality, most people come into SEO with no background. And that
Yeah.
applies to the managers who are looking after enterprise SEO.
So you developed the visibility governance maturity model. Could you talk to me about that? And how do you actually
Yes,
sell, and how do you even actually sell governance into organizations? But please tell me about your visibility governance maturity model.
yes. So the big learning from all these books, that insight came barely 6 months ago. And I found this word called governance. Not that I didn't know about it, but I made that connection that SEO needs a separate school of thought, a separate line of thinking about governance. It's basically this governance is designed to help management not worry about the details of ranking or Googlebot or anything like that. But they want continuity. They don't want reliance on a single person, especially if that person gets a better offer and leaves without leaving any trail of their learnings. The next person has to start from scratch. So I created this VGMM, which is Visibility Governance Maturity Model. And the maturity model part of it came from Carnegie Mellon back in the 80s and 90s. And it's an American university that's created a model that measures software development capability in 5 levels of maturity. So bottom one is chaos, and the top level 5 is perfection, and you may never reach perfection. So I said, let's borrow those 5 steps. And a couple of SEOs have done it for the implementation side of SEO, but I have taken it to the governance side. So that's the key difference, that everything I'll talk about with maturity is on the governance side. So basically, it's a number, it's a percentage. So the C-suite gets to know that our governance, visibility governance is at 80%, or it's at 20% or 30%, whatever it is. And that corresponds to 5 levels. So you can imagine 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and so on. Those are the 5 levels. So I've created this over 7 domains, and they are SEO, which has subdomains of local and international if they apply to you, content, website performance, accessibility, and AI governance. And I talk about AI visibility. This is not your internal use of AI, and there is a separate kind of AI governance that many people are talking about. This is not. This is about the governance of how well you are discovered, how well are you interpreted by external systems, and have you done all the right things to make that happen. So I run a workshop where I ask questions in a questionnaire, and the questionnaire has got 5 options for every questions: fully in place, partially in place, not in place, not applicable, or I cannot attest. And the last one basically means I'm aware that this happens, but I'm not the person to answer that. So I'll say cannot attest. And this applies to the 1 or 2 questions that apply to people who you wouldn't normally bring them to the workshop for 1 question. So it might be a legal question or an HR question. So all these answers are then processed, and you get this percentage. Now, the key thing that I've done is that certain questions, and participants don't know that, but some of these questions are single points of failure. And if you said not in place for any of them, it doesn't matter what your real score is, you are capped at level 2. And you're told that a SPOF has been triggered. And that basically means, okay, where is the SPOF? What can we do to fix it? And once you've fixed it, you get back your real score, which might be higher, usually is higher than a 2. So I've created this thing, and basically the idea is upper management now begins to treat SEO seriously. It funds it. It wants meetings to take place, and these are not boring committee meetings. These are basically governance meetings where they ask high-level questions. That is someone responsible for robots.txt, and that's an example of a spot. In some companies, they don't even know what a robots.txt is. So there are many questions like that. And so there are some committee sessions that have to be conducted throughout the year. And the top management is simply concerned with, okay, so where are we this quarter? And if we have dropped, they, like any management, they want to know why and what can we do to fix it. So what we, because if the management is skeptical about this, is this an extra meeting for them because they don't like more meetings? I have three ways of describing how to sell it to them. First, I call a system test. That if things work wonderfully this month, are we guaranteed that next month and the month after that things will work wonderfully? And if not, then there is a problem that we need to investigate. The second is the cost of fixing those things, the rework cost. Most companies are aware that they've got IT people and they're constantly fixing bugs and all that. But here, an external loss of visibility is something much bigger than what they anticipate, especially if it is an AI system's loss of visibility. Because you can't measure that if suddenly ChatGPT stopped recommending your brand, you may not realize it. Your traffic is up, your rankings are where they were. That's not affected. But your competitors are doing better than you, and one day you might realize that they're at the top of the market and you might still be hitting the same numbers. So we basically have to remind them that this is very important because you are trying to fix something that you can't really measure. This is the external governance that you do not govern. And the last of these 3 points is, what about the skeptics? There are still people who say, look, you're going to slow us down. Now, I say, well, as I've explained, you will move faster with governance than without it because you might have these big problems and it may take you an unknown amount of time to fix them. And I gave the example earlier of having millions of pages, billions of pages being created, but it takes a long time to discover the problem and even longer to fix the problem. So it's a good thing. So how do you start this thing? I tell them you must do a baseline measurement, a big audit, just like an SEO audit. This is a governance baseline audit. And you find out that you are at 20% or at 25%. And that gives you an incentive to start fixing those early discoveries, fix all the spoffs, and then do another check every 6 months. So that gives clarity to the C-suite.
So, Ash, tell me, if you had just a few minutes with a board of directors who've never heard the term visibility governance, I mean, obviously you've given a really good description there and covered it quite well about your your visibility governance maturity model. But say if you're sat in front of somebody, what would you tell them? How would you explain it to them who've never heard this term so they could understand it, to grasp it before it's too late?
So the key messages that you have to give them are that organic search visibility, which is the traditional SEO, is infrastructure. It's not just a marketing exercise. It's a capital asset with a yield. So they need to recognize that. Now, AI-mediated discovery creates a new kind of risk. And that's where you get their attention because they are familiar with risk governance. And you just tell them, this is another kind of risk. Brand visibility can erode silently without any alerts firing. This is where I said that your competitors doing much better. You're doing fine as before, except they're doing much better. So the board does not have to get into the details of SEO, and but you use the word accountability so that visibility is owned, measured, and governed at an appropriate level. So how I would talk to a board is point out money first, because that gets their attention. So they know that they get a lot of revenue through organic search. That's fairly easy to understand. They understand paid search, where one click costs them X dollars or pounds, and that's very easy to understand. Then if you ask them, do you know what percentage of your organic revenue inbound revenue comes from organic? Maybe they don't, because it's getting harder to really attribute sales to SEO. People play with all kinds of attribution models. The board often doesn't really care. Now, what they need to notice is that if their paid costs are slowly creeping up, that's not always because the search engine is charging more. It's also because they're having to advertise more. And that's one of the early hints that there could be an external system that is brewing and it's taking customers away. And that's the AI-mediated search that their potential customers are beginning to use, and they're being led in other directions. So the second thing that I say to them is that the risk profile of visibility has changed in the last 2 years, and your traditional controls are not detecting it. So what's happening now is that customers are finding their answers through other platforms such as ChatGPT, or they'll use a Google Home device, or Copilot, or some other platform. And I had a real example where my CIO came to me and said, how come Bing Chat, as it was known before it was renamed to Copilot, how come it's recommending all these other platforms but not us? And I looked up and I found that we had blocked CCBot, which is the common crawl bot. And that was one of the earlier bots that OpenAI had used when they were building up, sorry, not OpenAI, I meant Bing Chat had used when it was in the learning phase. So we unblocked CCBot, and within a few months, it started recommending our brand. So these are examples of things that governance can fix so that someone is always responsible for something. That's important. So this visibility drift is a major concern that they need to be aware of. There's also a reputational dimension. If, for example, you're getting bad reviews and you're not even aware of them because they're not complaining to you, but they're on platforms and they're whinging about your customer service, or the product isn't as good as before, whatever it is, the AI systems, the large language models, are learning from that kind of an observation, and they are not recommending you anymore. So I need to make the board aware of this, and they need to do all the right things to recover from such a situation. And the last thing is giving the board clarity about what governance requires. They need that they need to have someone who owns outcomes. So when you share responsibility without ownership, then governance will fail. So you need to ask 4 questions. Who owns accountability for visibility performance? Not for day-to-day SEO, but for the strategic outcome. Is that person senior enough to influence things? So that's the second one. So the third is this visibility reporting reaching the board through dashboards or whatever way that distinguishes between performing well today and structurally sound tomorrow? And the last one is, are we treating this AI-mediated visibility as a governance matter with oversight, measurement, and accountability? Or are we treating it as a technology novelty that someone in marketing is keeping an eye on? So one thing I mentioned is what I call the leadership test. That if your SEO depends on individuals pushing uphill against the system, then gradually their capability will vanish when they leave. So it's not a question whether your SEO team is talented, but does the system in which they operate encourages them to sustain that momentum? If they leave, will the next person be able to pick up where they left off? Do you have an internal wiki where you record all your learnings so that the next person doesn't have to repeat mistakes that a reasonable SEO might make because they don't know the intricacies of the system? So you want to reduce dependence on individuals. You want to create these structures so that your HR person, for example, hires for capability, not because the person is a cultural fit. And that happens a lot. An older person will always find it harder to find work when they are far more valuable to the organization. And HR has no way of knowing that. So they go by what they understand, and they'll say, oh, this is a young team of 20-year-olds, and here comes a 40-year-old. It won't be a good fit. So good people sometimes are lost. So you write all this down in your internal governance documents. So basically, I'm saying to boards, put visibility on the agenda at every meeting. Even if it's a one sentence from the responsible person, visibility is fine, or whatever they want to report. But it reminds the board at every meeting that SEO and now external visibility are both very important infrastructure matters.
Some very, very interesting points there, Ash, and certainly a lot to think about. And I think what's really interesting as well is I know that governance is obviously seen as an enterprise situation, but I think actually there's a lot of that can also apply to smaller companies as well. And I think smaller companies can learn from. Your visibility governance maturity model, for people who want to read into this a little bit more deeply, I believe that one of your books, you've got your AI, it's a little bit blurry there, AI visibility
AI
playbook.
visibility playbook.
You can read
That
this,
is book
and
number
then
3 out of 5.
yeah, and I believe, in fact, I've got number 5 here as well. And I believe that people
Once,
can also read a little bit more on your website. Is it
yes,
crm911.com?
yes, that's my consulting site, but the books have their own website called managingseobooks.com because the whole series is called Managing SEO.
So,
So I'll say one more thing, one
yeah.
request to any company that wants to be part of a benchmark study. So I'm giving away at least 20 workshops, remote workshops. So you'll get an assessment score of where you are, and you're helping me refine the model, and I'll share all the results with you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's good to know. Well, thank you very much for your time, Ash, and it's been fascinating speaking to you. Thank you for being on IMHO, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Shelley, and thanks to the viewers.